Hello, good afternoon, everyone. How are you today? Hope you all in a good situation with a happy and healthy situation. Okay, welcome to today's Studium Generale webinar. And let me introduce myself. I'm Eka Wulan from the Corporate Marketing Communication, and I will guide the running of the Studium Generale today. Is about the financial technology and innovation in Asia webinar. Okay, of course, this event is also a part of BINUS journey towards for 40 years BINUS, where the vision and mission of BINUS is fostering and empowering the society. In this era of the Industrial Revolution 4.0, innovation continues and makes life easier, right? But the COVID-19, in the good way, pandemic has also made people aware that how important that technology help us to our activities and make our activities easier. So we will discuss more about this today in Studium Generale webinar. Okay, before we start the event, I want to introduce you to our speaker is Mr. Julian Ng. Hello, Mr. Julian. Okay, Mr. Julian is the Assistant Director of the Monetary Authority of Singapore. This event will moderated also by Bapak Muhammad Ihsan Mojo. He is the Financial Economics and Innovative Specialist at the International Finance Program of BINUS University. Halo Pak Ihsan.
Hello, Mbak Eka.
Okay, so before we start I want to announce to all BINUS University students that you will get SAT point for those who participate of this event. So don't forget to fill in the link that will be distributed by the committee at around 50:30. And the time to fill in the link is only about 10 minutes. So just be aware about the time. And then for the participant that other than BINUS students, you will also can get an e-certificate by filling in the link that will be distributed by the committee. So what's the chat column? Okay, so participant can also ask questions in the Q&A column and comment on the YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram of BINUS University. So without any further ado, I want to let Mr. Muhammad Ihsan to moderate our Studium Generale today. So Pak Ihsan, this time is yours now. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Mbak Eka Wulan. And again, good afternoon and greetings, honorable participants and my fellow BINUSians. Once again, I would like to thank you for your participations in the BINUS Studium Generale 2021 sessions on FinTech and Innovation in Asia. My name is Muhammad Ihsan Mojo. I am a faculty member of BINUS University, and I am the moderator for our meeting today. Today, as mentioned by the MC, we are pleased to welcome our distinguished speaker, Mr. Julian Ng. Mr. Julian Ng is the Assistant Director of FinTech Ecosystem Office in the Monetary Authority of Singapore of FinTech and Innovation Groups. And as we know, the topic is about FinTech and innovation in Asia. At the moment, for the past 3 years, fundraise and investment in the FinTech sectors have increased by more than 100% and boosting to Indonesia GDP growth to around 2 and 3% annually. And this is before the pandemic. And then come the pandemics. The pandemic of COVID-19 will make nothing the same after the pandemic. Nothing will the same again after the pandemics. And fortunately for the FinTech sectors and the digital innovations, is actually boosting like the sector again by more than 150%. So many people that used to do the transaction physically now has referred and changed to the online transactions, which I mean, like on the one hand, this is actually increasing the volume as well as the transactions and the medium that people use in the digital outlet. But at the same times, also, I mean, like I just recently met this week with a couple of small business people who basically adversely affected by this pandemic because they used to do the physical outlet transaction instead of digitals. But I'm not going to discuss that more. I'm just going to leave to our speaker today, Mr. Julian Ng. He will highlight the current stage of fintech in Asia and charted the path of fintech innovation ahead. Julian will also highlight some challenge and opportunity that we possess in Asia. As been introduced by the moderator, Mr. Julian is the Assistant Director in Fintech Ecosystem Office of the Monetary Authority of Singapore. But previously, he was with the OCBC Bank as well, and the China Smart Pay Group in Singapore, and CPI Asia Consulting. With that introductions, let us welcome Mr. Julian to our screen and give our full attentions to him. Mr. Julian, the camera is yours.
Terima kasih, Pak. Hold on, let me share my screen. Okay. Thanks for having me. Good afternoon, everyone. Very honored to be here sharing with all of you. Looking at the BINUS video earlier and its facilities, they look amazing. So very happy to be here sharing with everyone today. The pandemic is a very interesting occurrence in the last 2 years. It has obviously not been the best situation for many of us, but because of the pandemic, it's also allowed for us to utilize platforms like Zoom and to be able to do a sharing like this today. Mm-hmm. So let me just do a quick introduction of myself. Sorry, this does not. Okay, there you go. So this is me. My name is Julian. I'm currently an assistant director at the Monetary Authority of Singapore in the Fintech and Innovation Group, specifically in the Fintech Ecosystem Office. What we do a lot is developing the fintech ecosystem. How do we help fintechs grow within Singapore, but also in the region? As you know, the world today is very interconnected. It's no longer one country by itself. Southeast Asia as a region is vastly important to the growth of all of us in this region. So that is what I do at the Monetary Authority. Previously, I was at OCBC Bank. You might be familiar with it because OCBC has NISP as a subsidiary in Indonesia. At OCBC, I had 2 roles. One was as a corporate banker, specifically banking technology companies. And before that, I was in the innovation lab of OCBC Bank, where I and my team looked at finding fintech solutions to partner and solve internal business problems within the bank. Prior to that, I was in China Smart Pay, which was a payments company in the early days of QR payments. So QR payments I'll talk about it a bit later, but they were trying to expand into Southeast Asia. I did my undergraduate in the National University of Singapore, and then I did my master's in Università della Svizzera Italiana, which is in Switzerland. So that's a bit of my background. So today, I'm not going to talk so much about the various types of fintech, because if you go online and Google, you can pretty much find the ABCDs of fintech. People will talk about blockchain, people will talk about cloud, people will talk about data, talk about artificial intelligence. Rather, I'm going to give you a bit more flavor of the various sort of real world sort of implications of fintech and the trends of fintech in today's world. So if you look at this, not sure how many of you might be familiar. This is QR Pay, largely made popular by Alipay and WeChat Pay in China about, say, 7 to 10 years ago, right? So interestingly, the technology behind this, so behind QR Pay, had already been around for quite some time. Since 1994, it was actually created by a Japanese company called Denso Wave. But it was the Chinese who actually saw value in this and sort of revolutionized the world in the last 5-10 years. Today, if you do go to China, it is almost cashless. It's very rare so as a tourist, when I go to China for work trips sometimes, because I don't have the sort of app, I take out cash, people would look at me funny. They'll be like, who pays with cash nowadays. So China has reached a stage where it's become a largely cashless society. What you need is your mobile. There's a saying now that you can leave your house without your wallet, but you cannot leave without your mobile. If you leave without your mobile, you tend to feel a bit lost. I think today, beyond just QR, the payments sector has evolved into even paying through facial recognition. This probably would lend some use cases in future where you don't even need your mobile and you just have to go out yourself, kind of like what we see in certain movies. So that is an interesting sort of development. But initially, a lot of this was sort of sorry, someone muted me. Initially, I think a lot of this was focused largely in China, but this has since gone abroad. Alipay and WeChat Pay in the initial years started targeting using this payment system, similar to say Visa, Master, Amex, which you might be more familiar with. They started to bring this abroad for the world's second largest economy and its travelers. So it started expanding abroad a lot. If you look at this second picture here, it's actually implemented in Korea, so out of China. And it has gone beyond borders into started off as largely tourist areas, but it has also been targeted at the large Chinese diaspora abroad. But what this really led to was that it evolved the region. As Pak Iksan mentioned earlier, today a lot of payments have moved into digital, especially with COVID. It's become a very key thing in a lot of our lives, right? And so this begs the question of why was this possible? So there's two large reasons to me. There you go. So the very first one is something which was predicted by Simpsons sometime back before it even really happened. It's mobile penetration, right? Everyone today has a mobile. Almost everyone has a mobile device. Some people have two, some people have more. But what this has sort of allowed is that the mobility of this device, because everyone has it, it's created the digital footprint that everyone's able to tap on. Even across the world, certain places have very high mobile penetration rates of up to 95%. Singapore probably being one of them. But beyond mobile, why China sort of managed to do this is also because China is a very interesting. So back about 20 years ago, China is primarily cash. It's a cash dominant society. If you look at the Western world, if you look at places like perhaps Singapore and Japan, we had cash, but there's also a large usage of say credit cards, Visa and Master. China only had cash, and then when this mobile phenomenon started taking off, they had no barrier in between to block their entry into the mobile device usage or QR pay. So they went from cash straight and leapfrogged into being a mobile payments kind of a society. So I think that is one thing that pretty much gave them that edge on why they were able to do it. Indonesia, similarly, I would think is also used to be very cash dependent, and it's gotten very digital in that sense, also because this has helped a lot. In Singapore, it actually took a while longer because people were very comfortable with like the credit card. And then say the credit card already had certain they had wave capabilities, right? You can just take a card, go to somewhere, tap, and it pays. So they're like, why do I need to use my phone for this? Because it doesn't really make my life easier. In actual fact, it's creating more steps now. I have a card and I have a phone, but in certain other countries where cash was king, they sort of helped to leapfrog forward. So what has this led to? This sort of reliance on mobile payments has created a society where data is king. So data is considered the new oil of the 21st century. Prior to this, oil was the fuel of the world. Wars have been fought, lost, refought over oil. I mean, if you look at the Middle East, that is a very large example. But it's with data, it provides a lot of access and also creates inclusion. So why do I say this? with fintech, for example, if a person, let's say in payments, previously if a person only uses cash, you would have no credit history, you would not create any sort of trail of what you're paying, what you're consuming, what you're buying. But with this payment apps, now you have credit history, people know that you are able to afford certain things. It creates that digital trail of what a consumer is actually spending on and what's his credit rating like. So this helps to create financial inclusion in a sense, also because a person who in the past was only cash dependent now has a digital trail and a credit trail, which allows banks to assess you better and lend more to you, or perhaps give you more services. So something that might be not so familiar to us in the past, but has become a norm in our lives now. So this does not really fall specifically in the sort of fintech space, but I'm going to talk about it a little because of how it has, why it came about and how it has affected us. So Uber, many of you would know. Gojek, I'm sure you're definitely familiar with in, say, in Indonesia. The question comes, why were they first created, right? Back then, taxis used to form cartels. You could go to sometimes after a late night, you could come out and you ask a taxi driver and he'll tell you, oh, I want to go to this place, I will charge you X dollars. When you know the metered fare is it's much smaller amount. They were not the most honest, or not the most, they controlled the space. But back then when Uber first started or Gojek first started, it was really to address this problem because consumers had a hard time finding taxis. When you needed it, it was not at the place you wanted it to be. You had to go find it. So pricing was one issue. Safety was another. You do not know if it brings you to the right location. Now with Uber, with Gojek, everything is tracked. And from there on, it evolved into building an entire digital ecosystem where you could even do payments, you could buy items, you could have rewards. So it's all linked within that space. So if you look at it now onto more of the fintech space, these are various players globally. So you've got players like Robinhood, you have players like Revolut, Fidor Bank, TransferWise. Not sure if you guys are familiar with these names, but closer to home, you have companies like OVO, Modalku, R129, right? So I'll just run through some of these examples and how they came about. So Robinhood basically is a trading platform, and what they do is they give access to trading at lower fees. If you look at way back, trading has always been a bit of a gap. It's not the most accessible for most people, and Robinhood seek to address that for the customer. How do you make it more accessible, democratize it for people? Revolut and TransferWise similarly, the banks would charge an arm and a leg just for you to remit money, say if I was working in the US and I wanted to send money back to Indonesia, if I wanted to send $100, at the end of the day, it is very likely that only $75 to $80 actually reaches my family back in Indo. But through these guys, where they came out of a process where they're able to remit money with much lower fees, it's really addressing the customer pain point, first in speed as well as in price. So that was Revolut and TransferWise. You've got examples like Fidor Bank or Modalku, which provided access to, say, SMEs, which found it very difficult to get financing if they wanted to expand their business. So why am I talking about all of this? The very first point that I think is very key, especially in the fintech space, is that, and so this is something I feel very strongly for, and I think you should sort of remember this, is that customer centricity is very important. The key thing that you would want to think is, what does the customer want and need, right? And less so of what the organization wants. Why do I say this? In the past, so I used to work for a bank. Banks would think, hey, how do I make my margins get higher? Or how do I get more people to take on, say, loans or whatever? So at the end of the day, my profit becomes better. so we get more bonuses, right? But that is not really the way to do it. And fintechs have started proving this because they have started looking at what does the customer want and what does the customer need. Yes, I can make a bit less money, but by doing so, more customers will start using my platform. And through that, we can actually make, and it becomes a win-win rather than what does the organization want. So I think the very first point is the customer at the heart of everything, really addressing what customers want and need, rather than sort of trying to deal with your bottom line. I think certain players, like say Western Union, which was very focused on remittance in the past, have realized this, and they are starting to feel threatened. So it has, in a sense, done well because it has made the existing players sort of wake up and sort of turn around their products and move towards what customers want rather than what their sort of profit wants. So brings me up to this. This is just a funny photo that I saw the other day. So if you look at this is a robotic barista, right? I guess someone decided, hey, let's make this, but does the customer really need this or want this? If you look at it on the left in the banner, it's like, how do I order my coffee? There's so many steps. It's creating more steps for the customer, but actually the customer just wants to come, order, get something and go. Does he really need a robot? Is this really addressing any problems? Possibly not. So maybe in 5-10 years, maybe, but perhaps at this time, people still enjoy that sort of social interaction, getting their coffee at, say, Starbucks or something similar. So this brings me to my next point. In fintech, particularly, I think it's increasingly become a very fast-moving space. If you recall my earlier sort of slide with the Simpsons photo, it's also where consumers are very easily distracted, right? One moment we could be looking at, say, blockchain could be the hot thing, and the next thing, cloud could be the hot thing. So because of that, a lot of times when you are, say, start in a fintech company or in a fintech industry, you would have to be able to adapt and pivot, right? You cannot fixate on, say, hey, I want to do something like this. But if you realize that it's possibly not the right thing, you would have to pivot off and address the sort of solution and not just fixate on it. So a story from back when I was working on a project, so one of the business problems was they wanted to provide, so this is SME banking, right? Small, medium enterprises, a lot of times they are not very digital. So they were like, hey, we want to provide them with a 24-hour chatbot service so that they can check their account balances at any time, check on payments, whether it's done at any time. So they did a whole project and then they created it. And then at the end of the day, after they tried it with the customers, the customers were like, no, I don't care. At 6 p.m. after I end work, I'm not going to think about work. It's over, right? And then what happened was, so that basically that chatbot became it was pointless. It was a whole project that was run for nothing. But then the sort of fintech managed to pivot and they say, hey, how about we use this chatbot for another function. We use it to answer queries from people who are looking at mortgage loans. And mortgage loans can be a fairly complicated thing. But it's a very narrow goal, right? It's really mortgage loans. You find out about the loan servicing ratios, how much you need to buy a house, how much you borrow, what are the rates, etc. And then after the bot addresses these questions, if you're still keen as a customer, it will direct you to a salesperson. And this helps to sort of make the salesperson life a lot easier because a lot of times people come and they just like, I want to find out, but they're not going to buy something yet. So this helped a lot. But the story is that the fintech managed to pivot and then created a success story. If they had said, no, we believe that this will address SME problems, then they would have been very irrelevant. So pivot to success is it's probably one thing that I think it's the second message that you should take back. So the next point I'm going to talk about is this. How many of you have sort of seen all these apocalyptic movies where robots are, now with artificial intelligence and they have tried to take over the world? I think this is a story that is sensationalized a lot in the media. It might be true in, say, 50 to 100 years, but at this moment, I don't think it's something we should be afraid of. Yes, it is a possibility, but the technology is not fully there yet. So if you are familiar with artificial intelligence, which I'm sure a lot of you are, it still takes quite a fair bit to really train the machines to do a specific kind of thing. Why I'm showing this photo is because I would like to say that don't have the view that robots are here to take over the world, artificial intelligence will take away my job. Rather see it as AI is something that can help to augment existing work. Artificial intelligence works within data, and data is, as I said, it's the new fuel. With so much data in the world today, the AI is able to process such big amounts of data and come up with insights which we would not be able to see as humans. There are certain solutions out there. So far earlier on, all I've been talking about has largely been consumer-focused sort of front-end solutions. But in finance, there's a lot of back-end opportunities and applications as well. So one example could be in transaction monitoring. In today's world, especially with regulated entities, so in finance, your banks, your insurance companies, your asset managers, all of this have a lot of insurance, a lot of compliance obligations in Indonesia through OJK or Bank Indonesia. And there are many requirements which has created big need for compliance staff, right? What happens now is a compliance person, say in transaction monitoring, would look at screens and screens of transactions happening. And then if something gets pinged out, he would have to go and check and see whether it's a transaction that is fraudulent or not. There are certain companies, for example, that are able to implement AI, where they are able to look at all this data and then they are a lot more accurate than rules-based system. So what happens is, in a rules-based system in transaction monitoring, for example, say if let's say if Jack Ma transfers $1 million and I transfer $1 million, because the rule would say that anything above 800,000 would get flagged. But for Jack Ma, $1 million is small change. For me, $1 million is something is wrong, right? But in an old system, the system would just trigger this anyway. With an artificial intelligence system, where it's trained to do it, it's able to sort of cluster multiple. So like my sort of social income is like here. If it goes above this amount, then it's not right. But if this guy's social economic status is here, if it goes at this amount, it's the same amount. But for this guy, it's very normal. So this helps to augment the compliance analyst job. He can now have more accurate sort of insights, which also means he has less cases to work on, which also means he can go home earlier when the day ends. So that's what I would like to say about artificial intelligence and how it can augment our work. Now, I think a lot of times when fintechs sort of start and they are very full of passion and energetic, and a lot of their view is to, I want to take over the incumbent. I want to kick them out of business. I want to make sure I want to take over all their business, and I want to be stronger than, say, a bank, an example, if you want to do a digital bank, right? I think that we should not view it as a zero-sum game. So this is a pie. It should not be, okay, there's only 8 pieces of pie. And if I take one piece, there's only 7 pieces left for the bank. Or if the bank takes all 8 pieces, there's nothing left, right? It should be viewed rather than, this is a pie, but can we grow the pie further? can we expand the pie for everyone? So there's actually more for everyone to tap on, more for fintechs to tap on. We grow it for fintechs, we grow it for the banks, grow it for insurance companies. So everyone gets involved in this, and the economy grows as well, right? As Pat mentioned earlier, from investments, it has helped GDP in Indonesia grow by quite a fair bit. This is a similar one, right? Because if you're able to come up with a product that more people can use, it's going to help grow the country as a whole. And why do I say this? Is also because I think in Southeast Asia is a massively growing economy. Not just Indonesia, we're talking about Vietnam, Philippines, Myanmar, hopefully. These are all places that can grow and have a lot of potential for growth. There's still a large segment of the population that is unbanked, especially in the rural areas. But this is becoming more easy because, as mentioned, digital and mobile penetration is something that is allowing a lot of them to get access. But even if many are banked, there's still a term that is underbanked, where they might have a bank account, but that's all they have. If you're able to teach them more about, say, finance, more about insurance, more about protection, this is the underbanked can become banked parts of the society, and the pie would naturally just expand. So the thought is, fintechs and existing financial institutions have their own strengths that they can bring to the table, right? Fintechs have agility, they have nimbleness, they have ideas. A lot of them have energy waiting to try change the world, do new stuff. The financial institutions, while they might have many legacy issues and processes and systems, they do hold certain benefits. For example, they have the trust, right? If you say, hey, I'm putting my money in a bank, I believe that if I come back in a year or two, my money would still be there and the company would not just close, because they're very regulated. They've been around for hundreds of years. So that's probably one that's important. They have scale across the country. If I'm in Bandung versus say I'm in Surabaya, I can still access my money in different spots. And they have processes which have been established over their long sort of tenure. So both fintechs and financial institutions bring something to the table. So instead of trying to kill each other, for lack of better description, why don't we look at partnering and collaborating? My view is, I think future is where fintech solutions start to get folded into financial institutions or partnered. Financial institutions will partner with a fintech that says, hey, now we are offering this solution that customers can use. Perhaps with, say, if you look at Ovo got bought over. That is one solution. I think in Singapore, you're starting to see a lot of your fintechs like, say, Neum, TransferWise getting offered together with a bank's solutions. So this is probably my third point. And it sort of brings me to this next slide, where a lot of people have this I think when I was in the bank, there was a big fear of like, oh, there's a lot of fintechs coming at us. Are they going to take over our business? Are they going to make us jobless? Are they going to put us out of business? If as a financial institution you do not pivot, you do not change, yes, that will be a possibility. And if as a fintech you do not sort of get big enough, it's also you're not going to make much of a difference. But something that's interesting to look at beyond this is perhaps this, where it's everyone's worried about, oh, are we gonna eat each other? But the question is really, are the big tech companies really going to take over all of us instead? As I mentioned, data is a massive play in today's world. And because the big techs, look at Apple, look at Google's, they have massive amounts of data. Would they be able to make something out of that? And by doing so, would they put all of us, financial institutions, fintechs, out of business? So that's something to consider. It could be very likely case. I mean, even in Indonesia today, you have a very new massive giant created with Gojek and Tokopedia sort of combining together, and that is probably the biggest source of data you can have in Indonesia right now. So that is a consideration. But I would like to sort of just reiterate the 3 points that I made earlier, where the first is really the customer first. So really putting the customer at the front of everything. The second is, being able to adapt and pivot. And the third is really to partner and collaborate and sort of grow that pie together. So I think with that, we leave some time, quite a fair bit of time for question and answers. Pak, over to you. Oh, and here's my LinkedIn QR. So if anyone of you wants to add me, just feel free to scan this. Mention you from this Studium Generale. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Julian. Thanks very much. I think that's a very, very insightful presentations on the fintech and innovations in Asia. And several key points has been raised by Mr. Julian. So it's about one is, I think, the stress about the customer center is very important, data, and partner and collaborations as well on the bank and fintechs. And on the last point is quite interesting. I mean, like I think Bill Gates, as one mentions that in 1990s, he's basically saying that banking are important, but banks are not. So this is, I think, the given that been seeing that in the futures that people will still need, do banking, but they no longer need like bank as a one institutions. But I think what we see recently, instead of like the fintech institutions go and replace banks, it's what we see now is some sort of like you say, like collaborations between the two institutions. I think most of the banks now also go to the digital banking. For example, like the DBS Singapore. I just have like one of our alumni in BINUS working in the DBS Singapore, and he's giving like some sort of like presentations last week, and it's quite insightful and quite interesting as well. And I'm not gonna be taking so much of your time because I've seen a lot of people. Some people's already raised his hand and want to ask you directly on the topic. Yeah, we have here Marcel. Yeah, Pak Marcel. Anyone else? So if you have any questions, as mentioned by the moderator previously, you can have either write it in the chat box, or you can opt to, for example, to directly ask questions to Mr. Julians. But I think we've already, without further ado, Pak Marcel, Marcel, silahkan. If you want to speak and talk directly to Mr. Julians. Thanks. Moderate, Pak Host, tolong difasilitasi. Thank you. Marcel, are you there? You want to ask questions? Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Thank you very much. Hello, my name is Marcel Kefras. I'm from in Sulawesi Selatan, city of Makassar. Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you, Marcel. What's your questions? Yeah.
Ini English apa ini Indonesia? Excuse me, Mr. Iksan. Halo. Mohon maaf, suaranya putus-putus, Mr. Iksan.
You can ask in bahasa Indonesia if you prefer to ask in bahasa, and I can translate to Mr. Julian.
Oke.
Yeah.
Oke. Pertanyaan saya, ya. Terima kasih atas waktu dan kesempatan sudah diberikan kepada saya. Perkenalkan, saya Marcel dari mahasiswa STEAM LPI Makassar, Sulawesi Selatan. jurusan ekonomi bisnis internasional. Nah, pertanyaan saya begini, bagaimana mengangkat anak muda di zaman 0.0 ini untuk bisa berbisnis, untuk bisa menyampaikan appreciation suatu bisnisnya kalau sampai ke luar negeri, Mister. Terima kasih.
Okay, thanks. Basically, Pak Julian, Mr. Julian Marcel asked, he's a student from the Makassar city in Ujung Pandang, yeah, in Indonesia, South Sulawesi. It's quite far away. Hi, Marcel. Greeting for you, yeah. And he's basically asking whether the how to basically for youth, yeah, particularly the Gen Z and the millennials, to take advantage of this digital development in fintechs, and pretty general as well, that he asked that is that possible to go internationals with this kind of like with the opportunity that's actually posed with this digital innovation 4.0 and that kind of thing, yeah.
So let me get the question correct. First is whether how do you sort of get into this space? Is that right? And
Correct.
then the second is how do you sort of is there possibilities of going international?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think so. For myself, I mean, having a tech background would always be very helpful. Because today the sort of, I mean, even in Singapore, there is a massive demand for tech talent, right? People who can code, and we're talking sort of programming languages like Python. I think that's very important. And so that I think BINUS specializes in certain faculties do that pretty well. It's known for being a tech university. I think that really is something that would help you. But that being said, me myself, I'm not a tech person, right? I started off more in the business side of things, but understanding. So I did economics and communications, probably similar to myself if I didn't hear wrongly. I started off in sort of in the business side of things. I'm really running certain parts of the payments company in China, SmartPay, and but that being said, having an understanding of how sort of business and tech sort of is able to interact, that will probably give you a very good step into entering that space. As for the international sort of expansion or the international journey, I think in today's world, borders are becoming sort of more and more blurry, and definitely there will definitely be a lot of chances for people to move. I mean, there's a lot of talent in Singapore that are not just from Singapore. They are from the region, and I mean, across the world, a lot of people are moving. If you look at Silicon Valley, I think most people do not really even originate from there. So I think the international thing, if you have the skill sets, you would definitely be able to move.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Julian. Marcel, hopefully that answer your questions. Yeah, there are a couple of questions as well from the YouTube and as well as in the chat box. Yeah, in the chat, in the YouTube, there's a questions of whether this is the questions about how well is the technology industry in China, because the questioners basically ask because they are very anti to the applications platform they are often use. Yeah. Like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. I think China is quite well, but I leave Julian to answer it. But I think China have WeChat, something that is actually original to you. But the other questions is from Pak Ibrahim, yeah, asking about, please explain about the issue of risk management in fintech and transformations of risk management to anticipate the risk in the future. I think this question is quite relevant for us, yeah, particularly in last week, if you happen to read the news, yeah, in Indonesia, basically there's a issue of 272 million data, including photo of profile of 20 million people who actually registered in the compulsory social security system, or BPJS Kesehatan, yeah, we call it as a BPJS Kesehatan, has been leaked and sold in the public. So I think data security, about the privacy of the of the customer is really protections, yeah, for the customers, really one very key issue in Indonesia now. And I think Singapore, yeah, particularly, can you also elaborate on that and how the Singapore government, the monetary authority of Singapore, Singapore is basically handled that about the privacy and security about customers' data. Thank you.
So I think the first question on how well developed is tech in China, and as to why they block sort of many things like say Google and YouTube. To be honest, okay, two parts to this. I think the first one is a lot of reasons on why sort of these platforms are blocked is largely political. So I would not touch on that. But if you were to ask me how well developed is tech in China, if you have actually traveled to China, I would say China is probably one of the most technologically developed, not just on hardware, but also on software in the world. If you actually go to, so in the, I think 2 years ago when I went to China, you could actually, so WeChat is their app. I think in Indonesia, you guys use a lot of WhatsApp, right? In China, they use WeChat, and WeChat is not just a chat app. WeChat is also social media, so it's like Instagram. It is also payments, so it's like your Gojek and your OVO. But the interesting thing is, for example, if you go to a restaurant, you can order your food before you arrive. You pay for your food. By the time you sit down, the food is ready and it's ready for you to collect and eat. So I think technology-wise, China is it's probably one of the more advanced ones. Just that a lot of times we don't really see their technology perhaps coming out as fast, because if you think about it, China has a population of 1.3 billion people. If you just build something for that city, it's very enough to sustain your company. So economically, that makes sense. For the second question by Ibrahim, I believe. Hold on. Yep. So on the issues on risk management in fintech and transformation risk, I think I believe your question is largely around the data security, privacy side of things. I mean, the world as we, sorry, some training, hold on. Sorry, someone's doing some construction works. Yep. So the world as we know, I think be it Singapore or anywhere, data security and privacy is going to be a very key thing. Cyber security is going to be one area that every government regulator is going to look in. I think previously in Singapore, for example, a lot of data has always been held on premises. There has been a shift towards this data being held on the cloud. And I think it's a sort of good progress towards that direction. The sort of data storage providers like Amazon Cloud, Google Cloud, they have solidified their sorry about that. They have solidified their sort of risk management processes and their data sort of data security capabilities. Granted, yes, there will be data leaks once in a while, and we would have to learn how to manage those and what to do with it when it happens. But I think by and large, the world has sort of learned to, it's a new segment, so it's developing in that sense. But I think it's getting a lot more secure in the next. It will get a lot more secure in the next 2-3 years. Cybersecurity has become a key focus area for many organizations.
Okay, thank you. There's a couple more of questions again, from the floor, is about your opinions about cryptocurrency, especially Bitcoin, by Fajar. And there's also questions about the tough competitions, particularly in the fintech industries, which what's going to be the experience of Singapore is basically handling and supervising these sectors. I think Pak Johannes, when you're asking about the fintech, I think what Pak Johannes means is the P2P, P2P lending, because I think there's a lot of issues about the P2P lending recently in Indonesia, particularly those who are quote unquote as saying as illegals, where they don't have like this proper license from the FSA, from the OJK, but they're still operating in Indonesia. And the third questions is again, questions about this illegal fintech, which I think again referring to the P2P lending, P2P lending platforms. There's a lot of I mean, like in the Indonesians news online or written papers, there's a lot of discussions, questionings about the effectiveness of OJK recently, particularly with the supervising of this illegal P2P lending, And I think this is it's my questions as well, because it's actually quite good. I mean, like to see what's going to be the experience of Singapore in handling this kind of problem there. Thank you.
So the first one on Bitcoin, I think that's a question that a lot of us get very, very often about cryptocurrencies. The monetary, like from my perspective, and not so much from the MAS's perspective. On crypto, the MAS generally is we're taking a wait and see kind of approach. But from my perspective, will it replace the current global financial currency and payment systems? I don't think Bitcoin will replace the existing financial systems. I mean, multiple reasons. One of it is that, I mean, existingly, yes, the technology is amazing. The technology is great, right? You have a decentralized ledger. It lends proof of truth. So technology-wise, cryptocurrencies will affect the way the world in the next 20, 30 years would function in terms of currency. But is that going to be Bitcoin? Will it be Ethereum? Will it be XRP or what? Or is it going to be a central bank sort of distributed currency? That is yet to be seen. So would Bitcoin replace? I would say unlikely. But would the technology impact the global financial currency systems? Definitely. I mean, if you look at China, for example, they have already issued a CBDC, right? It's a CBDC, but multiple other regulators and central banks are starting to look at it as well. So that technology is definitely going to impact the payment systems across the world. Okay, on the other one regarding P2Ps. So I think in Singapore, we do have a few P2P companies, quite a fair bit of them actually, and a lot of them have had to apply for licenses. If they don't apply for licenses, basically they cannot operate, especially in Singapore, which is a financial hub. So a license is very important, and generally, if you don't have a license, people would not really want to work with you. So I mean, if you talk about illegal lending, not just fintechs, right? If you talk about illegal money lending, it's an industry that has been around for hundreds of years, right? It's just that now with technology, it makes it easier for them to get out there and get their sort of money lending service more easily. It's back to the whole, because of mobiles, it's creating access or whatever. So I believe that similar to Singapore, OJK will also, like, they will only allow licensed ones to operate. The illegal ones, similar to your illegal money lenders that you could find somewhere, it's a matter of time, but eventually I believe they would be locked down.
Okay, it's quite interesting. I mean, like, this is again about like because of this digital medium. Even though they don't have license, many of the PT2 lending still can get like some customers in Indonesia. And as you mentioned, yeah, the good thing about Singapore is that people there is really not keen or not get in touch with those who actually doesn't have like a license. But I think most of the case in Indonesia where people approach like this or being approached by the illegal PT2 lending is because they don't realize that or they don't do a background check or due diligence of this platform, whether they are actually licensed or not. And I think that's one of the reasons. And even though I think OJK, I think every month issuing this new list of what is the legal, what is the license and which one is not licensed in Indonesia. But there are still many people who actually do the, I mean, like dealing with them.
Yeah, so I think it sort of boils down to a bit of an education kind of
yes,
like you have to teach people about, you know, what is a licensed fintech that you can use and what is not. And that probably will take time. It's like it's a financial literacy. How do you tell a person, okay, this makes sense because, you know, if you're borrowing this interest rate, it's fine, but you know, an illegal one's going to charge you so much. So that's going to take time.
Related to that point, Julian, the issues about like educations on financial literacy. I think you mentioned in the earlier in your presentations about how the mobile penetrations in Indonesia reach quite a lot. I mean, like it's basically 260 million, which is quite almost the same with the number of population. So you can say that each of Indonesia is basically have one mobile phone, yeah. But that number is actually not translated well into the financial literacy ratio. So our financial literacy ratio, I think, as of July 2020, is only about 55%. So we can say that about the 45% of people, it's still out there, despite the fact that they basically have the mobile phone. So I don't know whether they perhaps using the social media, they're using it for communications, but for one reason they're not using it for the financial transaction. So this is again, I think it's boiled down to the questions by Mr. Fatu, by the couple of questions by like Pak Gumilang here, yeah, and Pak Mika, Yulia Mika, and this is the same line of questions, yeah. Have started to utilize fintech in everyday life, but there's a lot of people who are still not aware of this beneficial facility. And I think this is boiled down again to the financial literacy. The fact that Jogja is one of big city in Indonesia, and Jogja is, I think it's one of the most digitalized city as well in Indonesia. So I'm quite surprised that Milka, that you ask questions about that, yeah, because there's a survey from Menko Info that the three biggest digitalized city in Indonesia is basically Jakarta, Bandung, and the number 3 is Yogyakarta. So it's quite surprising. I'm Gumilang from Taiwan. Gumilang is basically how to deal with this illegal fintech. Yeah, this is again because most of them is actually located in overseas, but I give it to you. I mean, like how Mr. Julian, how the Singapore Monetary Authority handle with this. I'm one of a blockchain user from Salatiga. Nice. I heard this news early that an anonymous governmental worker have received a lot of salary from our governments. Okay, this is the issues about like there's a lot of anonymous governmental worker. It means like it's not anonymous government worker. It means like fictive, like it's a fiction. So the peoples are not exist, but they made up the data. So they keep this data is keep receiving money from the government, even though they are not exist. So it's been quite issues. It's just like a recent issue in Indonesia, and this is again show how easy it's actually to manipulate this kind of data in Indonesia and then use that for some bad things or things which is not good. Yeah. we are civil instance. This kind of corruption. Yeah, this indeed that is corruption. I think. What do you think about applying blockchain for government worker? Can it avoid several corruptions? This is good thing. Yeah. Okay, this is new. I don't know that. Yeah. Okay, that's I think yeah. That's quite interesting questions. Thank you.
Yeah, quick one. I think the one talking about the behavior of collectors to intimidate late paying customers. I think that is it's a bit beyond the sort of regulators' purview. This one falls onto the police then, right? Because the regulators can create regulations, but enforcing it is always down. At least this kind of threat level, physical intimidation falls down to police level, right? I mean, it's probably the same in Singapore, because you can't expect, say, a regulator to come to the person and, hey, you send the police for that. So in that case, that's probably out of OJK's or BI's kind of space. Okay, the salary one is interesting. I mean, yes, there could be an application for that. Similarly to blockchains, one of blockchain's big sort of use cases is in the space of, say, trade finance. A lot of times it's very paper-based. Say I'm shipping something coal from Indonesia to China, and then people change the papers and all that. So they're trying to use blockchain to say verify that, oh, this is what is shipped out from Indo, this is what arrives in China. No one changed it in the middle. Similarly to this, in say on salaries and all that, right? This is the number of employees that we have, and it matches IDs of each and everyone, and it's sort of verified through blockchain. And then when payment comes out into the bank accounts, that is also verified. So that could be a potential use case. It could be something to look at, but then you would need. So the issue with blockchain is always, in whichever use case, it's never about the technology. The technology works. The issue with it is always about adoption, right? Which means, so in the case of trade finance, it means your suppliers have to come on board the blockchain, your end users at the end have to come on the blockchain, and the people shipping in the middle have to get on board. If one of this is missing, it's not, your source of truth is not as accurate. Similarly to this, if you want to do it, the registry has to do it, the bank has to do it, the government has to do it. So everyone has to come. So it's always an adoption issue. But it could be an interesting use case.
Yes, quite interesting as well. Yeah. Besides that, I think one of the recent applications with the blockchain, is for transfer of money as well. Yeah, donations, like that kind of things. Yeah, I think the UN, United Nations, just adopted like one of these scheme through blockchain, donations for refugees, in Syria, which I think the donor can identify and directly see that the money that they actually spend or donate will receive the well-targeted people. And
instead of 20% go to fees, 10% go somewhere.
Yes, and it's actually quite good as well, I think, for the financial supervisory body, because they can trace and they can look at whether the money is actually going to that people, and it's not for something else, like for example, like for terrorism or things like that, which is perhaps not everyone will like it. Okay.
Yep.
So okay, that's a good thing. There's one questions again here. I've got like is there any? I think that's it. Yeah, no more questions. I think it's the time for ini. If I think do you have like any Pak Julian? Do you have any last comments or any like some motivational message to all the students or people who actually listens to our today's discussions before I wrap it up? Thank you.
I think largely that, but I think if especially Indonesia is a very interesting market, and there is a lot of growth in that space. And I think if you're looking at, say, a fintech solution or something, Indonesia is definitely some place with a lot of growth. You can take reference from places that have already, I mean, China is probably one of the best places to reference because China, where China is today, where China was 20 years ago is probably where Indonesia is today. So that's probably good for inspiration. So otherwise, I think very happy, very honored to be here. Thank you for having me. I think there might be a couple more questions you want to.
Oh yes, yes. There's a one. Oh, I think this is like by Pak Faturido. Thank you, Mr. Julian, for the answer. But this is always a battle between blockchain believer and conventional bank. Is there any for cooperations in between them? Okay, you perhaps want to have remarks on that.
So I think
Yeah.
when he's talking about the battle between blockchain believers and conventional banks, I believe you're talking specifically on the cryptocurrency side of things. And less so on the blockchain, because like I mentioned earlier, blockchain has a lot of use cases that you can use in trade finance, supply chain finance, in verifying certain kind of transactions. But if you're talking about, say, cryptocurrencies in Bitcoin and conventional banks, I believe there is a lot of chance of cooperation. If you look at the space today, a lot of banks, even the big tier one banks, so banks like your JP Morgan, your Goldman Sachs, UBS, Morgan Stanley, they are starting to offer cryptocurrency trading as a solution or a service for their customers, right? Granted, it is slow because everyone is cryptocurrency by its very virtue being decentralized is unregulated as a currency, versus say Indonesian rupiah or US dollar, which is all sort of regulated currencies. Cryptocurrency it's still nascent, it's still very young, so people are still trying to figure out how are we going to move with this. But the banks are starting to take it on and look at it like, hey, do we offer this to our customers as a solution, as a trading solution, a service with certain risk management things involved, so that we can manage all of that. So I think there's a lot of room for cooperation. It's already happening.
Yes, thank you. I think for the cryptocurrency as well, yeah, for your informations, Mr. Julian, as well as people who actually listening, the Indonesian government basically has opened like this Bursa Berjangka, yeah, Indonesian future markets, which is the officials trading for some of the cryptocurrency. But I don't know whether that's actually good or bad news, yeah. And there's a couple of I think the U.S. governments, yeah, recently, the Fed has just announced they are, I don't know, this is whether this is true or not yet. They are studying the possibility. They're not saying they are planning to do it, but they are studying the possibility of issuing a crypto US dollars, so cryptocurrency US dollars, so which is, I think it's quite an issue, particularly after the Chinese government, yeah, I think, yeah, ban some of the, particularly Bitcoin, yeah, which goes like the value of the Bitcoins tumbling like almost half of this current value of whatever, more than half of the current value. So it's quite interesting to see where this is gonna end up. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, I'm agree with you, Julian. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, there will be some sort of like the nation authority that have to step in and back it up its value, because at the moment I think the value of cryptocurrency is backed up by the promise, remember, that is actually limited in supply, but who can control that is actually, there's a one feature I think in YouTube that I read in Bloomberg, which is quite good, yeah, about the pro and cons about this cryptocurrency. And there's I think a final one. There's one final questions. This is again, yeah, it's about the crypto and fintech innovation. So what's gonna be the crypto and fintech innovation? So perhaps. Okay, this is perhaps a questions in YouTube, and this is basically questions that asking about the innovative financing. If you are aware of that, the term, yeah, Julian, is about the innovative financings and the cryptocurrency. Many of the currently, I think there's a lot, particularly in Indonesia, that is one that is sponsored by international organizations. Yeah, but we're quite developing a lot of new instruments. Like for example, is the social development bond, okay, social bond, and we do have as well the impact investing and that sort of stuff. So it's basically like seeking for impact and as well as for financial returns. And this kind of instruments, these innovative financing instruments, somehow is quite related to the cryptocurrencies, because as I mentioned, yeah, the way the people actually wants to contribute or donate to the refugees, yeah, some refugees using like the cryptocurrency. And I think the questions is about that. It's not about the fintech ANSI, but it's about the innovative financings and the cryptocurrency. Yeah, perhaps you want to have like final remark on that. Thank you.
Not quite sure what the question is trying to ask. Sorry, can you could you help me? So I'm trying to figure out what was the question about actually.
Yeah, it's about the fintech and the questions fintech about and the cryptocurrency. Is that I mean, like perhaps the person in the YouTube asking whether this cryptocurrency will have greater role in financial fintech innovations in the future. What do you think on that?
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, I think it will change the world, the payments. I mean, even new products, right? Like you mentioned, it could create such that people are now able to donate directly to a sort of non-profit organization without the in-between layers that's going to eat up all the donations. It's going to change the way payments is going to work. So crypto will affect, definitely. The question is, how is it going to affect, and also which crypto will become the one that stays till the end. It could even be a crypto that has not been created today. So perhaps in 2 years might be something that comes up in 2 years, right? So I think that's something that we have to wait and see.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Julians. Thanks, everyone. Again, I would like to thank you, Mr. Julian Ng, and all the participants. Yeah, I mean, like you've been very active and quite wonderful participants, and a lot of questions and discussions in this forum. Hopefully, it will give you some insight as well as new knowledge about the fintechs and innovations in not only in Asia, but we're talking about like more globally about the fintechs and innovations in the world. Yeah. So again, thank you, Mr. Julians. And with that, I want to close it and give back the forum to our MCs. Mbak Ayu, silakan.
Mbak Ulan ya, Pak.
Ulan, sorry, maaf.
Okay. So what a great and interactive discussion here we have. So I want to thank you so much for your knowledge, Mr. Julian, and then Pak Iksan for moderate. So before I close this SG, we please to all participants to open the camera so we can do the documentation about the SAT point and e-certificate. It's only valid for who fill the link in 15 until 15:30, who filled the link to fill the SAT point and certificate claim. Okay, maybe a committee can lead the photo session for our documentation. So audience, please open your camera so we can do the photo for our documentation. And don't forget for the SAT point once again, and for the e-certificate, you may fill the link in around 3:13 until 3:30 this evening. Okay, I start to count already, everyone. Okay, how many slides we have today for photo?
18, quite a lot. 18 slides.
Okay, 18. Okay, 1, 2, 3. One, two, three. One, two, three. So 1, 2, 3.
Okay, this is what happened. I mean, like for this digital era, I think Mbak Eka has just recently went in freeze or something. Okay, so again, yeah, on behalf of BINUS Universities, I would like to thank you for everyone's, particularly Mr. Julian Ng, for willing to come up and give a presentations in the Studium Generals. And for all these participants, you've been very wonderful, been very active, and during the course of the presentations. And with that, I think we've already have take your pictures as well. And for the SAT points and for everything, you can check like the link that is provided in the chat box, as well as gonna be given to you as well, the link to the e-certificates where you can claim those SAT points through your email address. With that, I would like again say thank you and have a nice good weekend for the coming weekend ya. Thank you everyone. And salam, terima kasih. Sekali lagi, saya atas nama panitia dan BINUS University mengucapkan terima kasih kepada Bapak, Ibu, dan Saudara semua. Terima kasih, saya tutup dengan ini, bersama ini, terima kasih. Selamat sore dan Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Julian. Thanks very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks. See you.